So headerless detail. This is your work with. Okay, so normally with a headerless detail, you're going to do the same thing as this. The only difference is now you're not going to work item by item. Uh, you're going to work based on. Sorry, you're not going to work item and unit of measure. In this case, what we want to do is we want to build a form where when you work with an item, you see all of the items unit of measures, and you can input weights and measures for every unit of measure for that item. So I'm going to create a new headerless detail. And I don't know if you create a view for this. Let me see here. B and here B. You could use the same view. Sometimes it's not a good idea. Sometimes it is. Um, it's too early to explain the difference between it now. Um, so normally you're not doing this type of thing. Normally you're not creating uh, one that you can do multiple and one you can do single. You choose one, right?
Okay.
Am I going to edit it this way or am I going to edit it this way? Normally you don't do both, right? Um, for now, for this particular form, because we're using exactly the same data, I'm gonna use the same view. So it's called this, but this should save revisions, so you know what it is. And this is not test. This is like we're gonna use these. Okay. So make sure we have everything in there. Everything's there. Okay. So when you create a headerless detail, you assign a business view to it. Same as you do this one. Okay, when I save that, you're going to see that the data structure automatically the key. Now, the only difference now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in here. I picked the header detail. Wrong form. I chose header detail. Header list detail I'm showing you now. Yeah, it wants a view for the header and a view for the detail. This case, it's going to be it still has a header. The form has a header, but it's got one view. You're working with one view. I think I've used a header detail twice. Like you can use it. It's powerful, but I don't really use it much, right? Okay, so here I'm gonna say item.
And in PowerForm you use headless too.
In Power Forms, it's not headerless. There's different forms. Okay, so now you see again, it puts automatically the data structure. So when I click on here, I have all my fields available to me. So you'll see that what I'm going to do is I'm going to just put in a few of them to start off with. Let's say length, width, height, weight, volume, oversize, you put as a checkbox. Uh, it's this here, you do it, right? Yeah, no checkbox. Oh, shit. We did yes and no. I have to see how I program my other thing.
Okay. I'll put yes and no for now.
Okay, so for now, check my values, yes and no for now. Okay, so I have that, and you see that it's the same thing as like a work with form. I can add, you see here when I click on the grid, what's over here is what's left to add. I've already added short item number, so I don't see it here. But when I click on the header portion, I could add it. And I could also filter. I can go do the same thing. I could filter. The only difference now between a headerless detail and a fine browse is that this form is now you can edit it.
Okay.
Okay? So so I'm gonna show you, we're gonna take it step by step, okay? So over here in the work with, I'm gonna remove the select by just commenting it out. Instead, I'm gonna call the other form. And it's this one here, I think. Okay, and I'm going to pass, in this case, just the short item number, not the unit of measure.
On which button did you put the action?
Select. Okay, so now when I select this, it's going to call the other form, and it's not automatically doing something for, it's not automatically filtering for me. Okay, so how do you get that automatic filtering? So what you do is you put on your header, you can put a short item number, right? And because this data structure, hang on, I'm on the wrong, I'm getting confused now. This one here. Because this data structure is a BC, it'll automatically get copied here to this. Then you could do is you could put a filter here. Okay. Actually, hang on a second. I'm gonna see something. Just want to see something.
Yeah, I know. I think he's gonna grab everything.
I think it might, but I just want to validate. Hang on. Before I tell you something incorrect. Yeah, okay, grabs everything. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the short item number on the form header, and I'm going to filter by it. So I don't have to do any code to pass anything to here because it's the BC data structure, right? It's this one that's being used. So it'll automatically take it from the BC and put it to the FC. And it's being filtered. So now when I select this, it's going to filter for just that item. Okay, so not more often than not, what you do is you don't want I don't want to edit this. Right? I don't want to have somebody change this. So you're not putting it here. Okay. So when what's weird now, okay, what happens now is that when I go and I save this thing, it's gonna take the grid columns, okay, but it doesn't have a grid column for the short item number. So what does it convert the short item number to? It Well, whatever you put up here, because it's a BC, okay, relates to all of the columns. That's a headerless detail. Okay, so you should never have something here and here. Well, you could have it there and there, but if you do have it here and here, make it editable in one spot, not both spots. Okay, so
So the headerless knows.
the headerless detail knows that whatever you have on the grid is per record, and whatever you have on the header is for all records if you're when you're saving. Okay, so so when I go here, okay, and I go back to over here and I run this, where's my unit of measure? Hang on, I missed one of them. Okay, so if I change this, let's say to, or let's say weight to 5. Okay, nowhere on here on my grid do I have 271. But when I save this, it'll automatically, it should have automatically saved that. There we go. See, so automatically see, I didn't tab, you know, the problem that we have. Okay, so it's saved the because it knows what the key is based on the data structure. Okay, and it knows that part of the key is in the header. The other part is on the detail. So this is going to apply to everything. So normally what you would then do would be you don't want to work with the short item number. So you want to add the second item number to the grid, and you're going to hide this one here. I'm not even going to make it visible. And this one is going to be fetched. But you know what? Before I even do that, I'm going to, you know what? Yeah, before I even do that, I'm going to do that last. I'm going to make this form work in read only. Sorry, I'm going to make this form work in an add and an edit natively. Then I'm going to do all the bells and whistles after to make it short second item number instead. So what this allows you to do now, okay? Normally what you're doing here is you want to gray this out when you're not in add mode. So because you don't want to do something like this. Okay, I'm editing short item number 271. When I go into it, I shouldn't be able to change this. So by default, the application knows this. Okay? Because it's part of the key. Okay? But when I go into add mode, it's saying, oh, I gotta call that app. So the concept's the same. Instead of calling the fix inspect, I'm calling the headerless detail, and I'm calling it on the add button with passing no parameters. But when I call it in the revision, the only difference is The old way, you were revising one key at a time. So what's the key? Both of them. The new way, you're passing just the short item number. And the other parts, you're gonna allow them to add many keys in one shot. But it's the concept's the same. You're adding select and add, you're making calls to the form. So when now I call this an add, what the heck? Hang on a second. I may have told you something invalid. I did tell you something invalid. The application doesn't, I don't think it knows it. On a fixed inspect, it does. On a headerless detail, I don't think it does. No, it doesn't. On a header detail, it does. Headerless detail, it won't. So it's gonna be, so then it's my job now to do that programming, because I don't want somebody to change this after. So to do that, we would go in the post dialog is initialized, say if the form mode is equal to update mode, then on the control, we're going to disable the control for short item number. Because normally that's how you want it to work, is when you're modifying. Okay, I can modify for this item. I can add as many as I want for that item, but I should not be able to change the item that I'm working with. I'm working with this item. So you disable the short item number. Now I can add as many unit of measures as I want for them. Okay. The other thing now, as when you do an add, well, now you're adding a new item. So it doesn't even exist yet. So just add a new one. Okay. So there's also another problem with this form. Okay. Um, I don't know if this will actually even work, but I normally protect against it. I don't think this will work. Oh, it does work. So we're good. Normally I protect against it, but it works. So what you're this I like better. So what I was gonna do is just, if you're in edit mode, don't allow changing this unit of measure. Allow, if you need to change the unit of measure, it would require you to delete and add a new line. Normally that's how I do it, but in this scenario I don't see why we would force that. In a lot of scenarios I force it because I don't want them to change the key of a table. Okay, I say if you're going to change the key, delete your old and add a new. Okay, but in this scenario, I don't see why it would be a problem, because they don't know it's a key. To them, it's not a key. It's just some data, right, that they're manipulating. So now what I could do is I can add a box, for example. Say the box is 100, 100, 10, 50. Okay, and I will have to add the math here, the same function that you did. Okay, on the other one, we'll do it here instead, but that'll do next. So let's just say, whatever, let's just say 20. So now when I click OK, for this item, JDE knows to update versus insert automatically, no coding. JDE knows. See, now I filtered both items, like a box in each. If I change this and I add something, JDE knows what records we're gonna get added, what records are gonna get So that'll do an insert. That'll do an update. Okay.
Okay, and that's why when I override the action on the button, I put an insert and an update, one after another one.
Well, you probably did it because you that's it. Some of them you're inserting, some of them you're updating.
I overwrote I disabled the action of the button, and I wrote one after another one, and it was doing the right thing.
Okay, I don't know exactly what you did there, but JDE will know. Basically, it'll know whether you're doing an update or an insert.
Okay, because I didn't understand, but
Okay.
I kept on trying, and finally I succeeded. But
This is the proper way of working, and so now when I work with that, okay, the events that you have access to
yeah.
to to change the way that that's going to work, okay, is or not change, but if you want to do more stuff on an insert and more stuff on an update, the events that you have access to are on the grid. You see add grid record before
Mhm.
versus update grid record before. So in this scenario, I would do something like this. Okay, in the post dialog is initialized, just like this one. Do we not do it here? You're not doing it here. We've changed it. Okay. In the post dialog is initialized. We're going to grab all the audit information. Okay, so we're going to get the user, and I'm going to make it a form, scope to the form, because I'm going to use it I'm not only using it in the post dialog, I'm going to use it throughout the entire application. So the user, the time of day, the date updated,
Throughout the application or the form?
the entire, well, this particular form, yeah.
Okay.
PMJ, date updated, program, and JOBN. So those you'll get used to.
Yeah.
They're the audit. Okay, you use them all over the place. Standard ones, yeah. So there's date updated UPMJ, program ID PID, time of day TDay, user ID is user, and workstation is JOBN. So then there's a method or a business function called get audit information. This one. That'll give you 4 out of the 5 values. It'll give you the username who's logged in. It'll give you the date. It'll give you the time. And it'll give you the workstation. It's called here workstation user ID.
Mhm.
It's the workstation ID. It's the name of the computer that's running the thing.
Okay.
So it gives you everything except for the program name.
Yeah.
Program name you code yourself. So you get the audit information and assign the program name. So it's going to be P55. For legacy reasons, they have EP,
Uh-huh.
Enterprise Program. Okay. But I don't know. Lately, I've been kind of doing a bit of both. If you look at JDE, they'll do probably EP for most of the stuff.
So EP is enterprise.
I don't like it because it adds an extra character to something that.
Mhm.
So anyway, I usually just do the name of my program, which is P55410002. Okay, so that's the program that updated it.
Mhm.
That's the and getting the other audit information. So when I do an update, JDE will update everything that's in the grid
Mhm.
and these values here as well.
Mhm.
So if those values are not in the grid or on the form, they're going to get updated to nothing. So if you don't want to touch them, you don't include them in the business view. Otherwise, if it's in the business view, it will issue an update or an insert statement including those values. So these are the values that we want to hard code. So there are values that we want to hard code, and there's audit information that is mixed in here. So we hard coded those here. We hard coded those values. I don't even think you did hard code them. You put them here. But this application is not telling the user, is not allowing the user to choose this for now. In the future, it might change,
Yeah.
but I doubt very much it's going to change because we standardized the way we work with our weights and measures.
Yeah.
Weights are always entered in pounds. Volume is always entered in cubic feet,
Yeah.
and dimension information is always entered in inches.
Yeah. I put those ones just for testing.
Yeah, for sure, and it's fine. But what my point is that either, okay, I would have to do the same and add these on the grid,
Okay.
or if I don't want to, I'm just gonna hard code it. So that's what I'm gonna show you now. I can tap into that um, add grid record before,
Uh-huh.
okay, and I could set it. I can set the BC because that's what gets saved, right?
Yes.
BC. So that's BC, but it's a
Yes.
BC that applies to everything.
Yes.
That's BC, but it's a BC that applies to the grid record. So I'm gonna say BC volume is equal to volume is FC. I'm gonna say weight is LB, and I'm gonna say unit measure dimensions is inches. So I could do this. This is one way of doing it. Add grid record before, set it to this. But that's on an insert.
Mhm.
I'd have to do the same thing on an update. Okay, so how do I make this code better? Well, I don't want to repeat FC, LB, IN, so I'm gonna make some variables. So I'm gonna make a unit of measure weight, unit of measure volume, and unit of measure dimension. Okay, so I'm gonna say unit of measure, this is volume, unit of measure weight, unit of measure dimension. Okay, so this allows me a centralized place to set my hard coding rather than hard coding in two places.
Yeah.
So now I can go here and I can say set it to the variable instead. Okay, but then again, I still have to copy this. I still have to paste it here. This is the way I normally do my programming.
Mhm.
Okay, but in this particular case, if I want to prevent this altogether and have JDE manage it for me, well, all I really need to do, okay, I'm giving you some options here on how you
Yeah.
can do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
All I really need to do is add those fields here and hide them.
Mhm.
And JDE will take whatever's in those fields and it'll do an insert and update because that applies to everything, which would save me from having to write my code here.
Okay.
I wouldn't have to write that code anymore or that code anymore.
Okay.
So to me, in this particular scenario, that's my preferred solution because the less code I
Okay.
can write, the better.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
So
I would take this one here,
so you
put it there
initialize the FCs as
into my hard coding. I would
okay
hard
as
code the
null
FCs. That's it. I'd hard code my FCs.
and hide them. No, you can leave them.
No, I would hide them. Well, you could leave them. We could leave them for a user to see if
Yeah.
we wanted to, or we could hide them. You know what? It's a good idea to keep them so they can see.
Yeah.
So we'll say,
Because want to make sure that
yeah, they know
they
exactly
know
what that's it.
what's
So it's good to have it. So normally I always set my grid, my form guide to 1024 by 768, and I make this thing a lot bigger. So I don't need that much, so I can get away with this because this is 1024 by 768, but most of our screens in the building are a lot bigger than 1064 by 768. So I know I can get away with a lot more than this. It'll adjust, but the bigger you make this, the more screen size you have to play with, the more fields you can place on the form, and the more grid columns you can see or you can add to a grid. So I'm gonna make it bigger, put it down, put this bigger, make this the same size. Ah,
What's the blue rectangle?
that's my guide. That's my guide for 1024 by 768. So that's 1024. That's 768 down to this here. So I'm going above that, which means that I'm designing for a bigger screen than that.
Okay.
But it only has a guide. That's the cap. But I can send a custom guide if I want.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I know most of our screens are whatever, I can do that. But me, I kind of like you can actually get away with like you can get away with a lot bigger.
Yeah.
So I know that this for sure I can get away with because it's not that too much out. But you'll get used to that. And if you really want the guide, take a screen size and plug it into the custom and you'll get the guide for it. So I'm gonna just do this. Okay. And I'm just gonna make those read only. So now I don't need those variables anymore. And instead, I'm gonna set the form controls. So this is the volume. This one's the weight. Okay, so now I just defaulted it at the beginning, and I don't have to worry about setting the um, those values when upon saving. So I don't have to worry about it over here. But what I will put in here, okay, because I don't generally this makes sense to have it as a form control because it's some data that could potentially be changed in the future and but but when you're working with audit information, generally you don't have it like you could put it there and hide it,
Okay.
but I'm just gonna go like this. I'm gonna say when I add in the program ID, take the program ID.
Okay. Because those are kind of
They're like, well, you
the
could,
internals of the system.
yeah, yeah,
Nothing can change.
yeah. You could program it and get away with it the other way as well, and you would actually save some code a bit. You wouldn't have to repeat yourself. But I prefer not to have fields for those things, and I prefer dealing with them um, like that. And what you could even do if you really didn't want to repeat, like have your code do this, like if you didn't want to repeat yourself, like I'll show you. Hang on, workstation ID. Okay, so normally I would do this, copy it, and when I'm updating a record, same thing. Okay, now if you don't like the repeating yourself here, you could just create a button,
Okay. Yeah.
right? You just say function update audit info, make it invisible, take the code that you have over here,
Yeah. Okay.
place it in there, remove that and just call the button instead. But you still have to repeat that. You have to say update audit info on an ad, and you have to do it also on a
Yeah, but at least you had it
in one place. Yeah, that's it. Okay, so
Much better this way.
um, that is showing you now those two events. Okay, so now what do we have here is every single thing in my view is being touched. It's either here, here, or assigned by my application to the BC. So what's important on a headerless detail is that every single BC that you have available to you in there will get updated. So make sure it's got a value. And if you want it, if you if you have something like this
Yeah,
and you don't want this particular application to work with it,
yeah.
but you want to make sure you don't overwrite it. Okay? Put it on the grid. Like you have one of two options. Don't include it in the view that
Okay.
this thing works with. Then it won't be touched. It won't be touched. You,
Ah,
it'll get its default value when you add, and it'll never update that column.
okay, quick question. Can I have the headerless loading a table instead of a view?
Only through the custom way. You always have to. These things they always work with views. All forms work with views.
Oh, okay. No. Okay, yeah. What was I doing? I was fetching from the table instead of the view.
That's fine, but you're loading the grid yourself. In this
Yeah,
case, you're letting the
but what's the
application deal with it.
if you fetch from the grid instead of the view?
You mean fetch from a table instead of a view?
Yeah.
The only difference between that is that a view you can have multiple tables joined already together.
Or it
So
can be less fields.
so you're doing less
Yeah.
input output. So
Okay.
it'll do an inner join,
Okay.
right? So instead of saying grab table from here, grab table from here, grab table
But
from
if
here,
the table is identical to the view, it's the same
it's
thing.
the same thing. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank
If
you.
it's one like one to one, same thing. So as I was saying, if you have a field that you don't want to be updated by this application that's in the table, either don't include it in the view, or in, if that's not an option, you need it in the view for whatever reason you want to show it, or I don't know something, you need to add it to the. If you don't add it to the grid, this thing will get overwritten. So add it to the grid, and you can just not make it visible. So that way, when you're updating existing ones, it'll grab the current value and it'll put it there, but it'll just be hidden. And when you save and it does the update, it'll take whatever value is there and it'll update it to the same value it was before. And on insert, the user's not inserting anything. It'll just be the default, which will be blank. Okay. In our scenario, and what I'm telling you here, it's gonna come and it's gonna bite you in the ass. I'm telling you, you're gonna forget. Even watching my videos, even me, I still do it.
Okay.
Okay. You're gonna see. Um, you're not gonna abide by that rule, and you're gonna see you're gonna overwrite some data. Okay, so it's something that I kind of try and think about. It still happens, and to be honest, I didn't even know it worked that way until recently. It's been 10 years I've been working with these things. I didn't even know it worked that way until like maybe 2 years ago. Oh shit, why did it was when I building my RMA application. Because most of the time when I'm building a headerless detail, I always include what I'm going to be using. I never include more, right? But I was working with views that had more in my application,
Okay.
and then my shit was getting overwritten.
Okay.
All my columns were getting overwritten. I was like, what's going on? That's how I realized that it worked that way. So it's been
So
only 2 years.
how
And
do you disable it? Not to be say it again.
either you don't include it in the view at
Okay.
all. So this column, I don't want to touch that column.
Okay.
Don't include it in my view.
So only the columns that are in the view will be updated.
Will be updated.
Okay.
All right.
One choice.
One choice. Second choice is if you do have it in your view
Yes.
and you still don't want to work with it,
Yes.
add it to your grid, even if you're not working with it, and do one of two things. Make it disable the input so that no one can input data into it,
Right.
or probably what you're going to do is just make it invisible. So it's
Okay.
still there. So when I click, when I click into it, okay,
But you have to show it.
it'll load. It'll load. Look, it'll load.
Yeah.
But it's invisible.
Okay.
So it'll stay it'll stay in it. When I click OK, whatever's there,
Yeah.
even if it's invisible,
Yeah.
it'll get saved. And so JDE is going to do the work to grab what's already there
Okay.
and save what's already there.
Okay.
But JDE is doing the work for you.
Okay.
But if I don't include it, if I don't include it at
Right.
all in the grid, JDE will not grab the value.
Ah.
Okay?
So which one will be saved?
Blank, the default. It'll
Ah.
overwrite it with blank.
Okay.
Okay? So that's why,
Because it was in the
because it's not in the grid and you're not working with it. So when it goes to save, it saves everything in your business call um what do you call it? Everything in your business view that gets loaded
Yeah.
gets saved. Okay?
Okay.
But because I don't have it on the line level,
Yeah.
I don't have a value for this thing. It's gonna get saved to nothing. Okay, so that's why to be able to be able to make sure you have that value included in the grid. Now that's just a tip because 99% of the time, look, I got away with it for 8 years without even knowing that it worked that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because 99% of the time, the columns that you have in your business view when you're working with a headerless detail, you're working with those columns. You add exactly.
So to be cautious, just render them and hide them.
If you're not going to work with them, either consider removing it from the view
Okay.
or put them there and hide them. Okay. Um, okay. So now I have everything that I need. I'm going to put that back as a checkbox. So go out of here, go back in here. So now what I have in here, um, dimensions is not set. LB dimensions is not set. Something wrong here. Hang on. Okay, so I'm gonna make it bigger so that they see. But you have inches, pounds, okay, and I can now modify the records. Now what's missing from this? A delete button. What if I want to delete this record here? I entered it by mistake.
Mm-hmm.
Super simple on a headerless detail, because usually on a headerless detail, you're working with one column, sorry, one business view with one link to one table. Okay, all you got to do to make that work is add a delete button. Insert, it's a special button, delete. That's it. JDE will take care of deleting for you. Here, when I go into it, I'm going to say delete button. And when I delete, okay, click OK. It does not delete until I click OK. So if I cancel out of here,
Okay,
it's
that's
not
how it
deleting it.
works.
It's not deleting it. I go back, it's still there. I need to delete, click OK, click OK, and now it's deleted. My box got deleted. JDE managed deleting that for me based on the key. This is where, okay, even when you add new records, oh, I entered that by mistake.
Yeah.
I didn't save it yet. I can still delete it.
Okay.
Okay, but it won't even do anything in the database. JDE knows it hasn't even been persisted. It has never been persisted. So just remove it from the grid.
Okay.
Okay,
So it's looking for that. I have
so,
no idea.
okay, and then the other thing that could potentially cause a problem, is we'll test it right now. If I change this to box and then I delete it, I have no idea how that's gonna work. See? That's why yeah, didn't work. See that?
Mm.
I went in, so look, I have 271, okay? I have a pair and an each.
Mm-hmm.
I go into it. This remember at the beginning I said normally I make this
Yeah,
this is why. I change it to a box, okay? Change it to a box, and then I delete that line.
yeah.
So I should be left with only one record, the each.
Okay.
And I click OK. I still have two records.
So you needed the box.
I know, but this is why I normally, because to a user, they're like, well, what the heck's going on? I get like users, they don't know keys and all this stuff. They said, hey, I should only be left with an each. So that's my screen has,
Yeah,
right? So chances of something like you could leave it and then explain that to a user, or you can disable this from being able changed.
because the key doesn't have to change.
Okay, and that's it. If they want to delete it, they can delete it. And if they had it added a box, well, then you're adding a box here because JDE when it's deleting is deleting based on the key. What's the key? This column and this column. If I change the key
Yeah,
and then delete, it's deleting the changed key,
yeah,
which doesn't exist yet.
yeah.
So that was just like a note about that and why I do that. But in this application, I think I'm gonna leave it like that. Okay. Um, so now I have a working headerless detail with very little code that I wrote, right? I just double click. JDE manages saving an insert versus an update.
Yeah.
Same as the
Fine.
the fix inspect. Fix inspect is the same thing. It's managing an insert or an update based on if it already exists. This is doing it. The only difference is this is doing one record at a time, where this is multiple records.
Mm-hmm.
So the only part that would be necessary now would be some validation in there. So in the validation, what I normally do is I validate when the grid is the best placed on a headerless detail is row exited and changed either inline or asynchronous, doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I usually do it inline. And here I'm going to do some testing.
Mm-hmm.
So you could do it column by column. I generally just like all my validation code in one spot,
But I find
right?
it's buggy when you do it column by column.
It is very buggy. It is buggy.
It's
It is buggy. That's
I
why I
have to
like.
remove everything.
That's why I like doing it.
Okay.
I like doing it here. It is buggy. It doesn't clear your errors properly, and
Oh my
I
God.
found that buggy as well.
It's yeah.
So normally I put it all here.
Okay.
Okay, and sometimes I'll just do it here. Sometimes I'll have a lot of times, right? A big chunk of the time, I'm creating a method or a button called validate grid row. So all my validation for my grid row is on that method in that button.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna make it invisible, and when
Okay.
I row exit, I'm gonna call that button validate grid row. Okay, so now in the validate grid row, I'm gonna test a few things. So I'm gonna test. Okay, I'm not gonna write the code for it right now. Okay, but what I would do is test the UOM is valid for the item.
I gotta write it.
Sure. Test the UOM is valid for the item. Same way you did it before.
Yes.
You're gonna do it here, but you're gonna do it at a record level.
Yes.
If there's an error, the only difference between the two forms is here you're setting a control error, here you're setting a grid cell error.
Mm-hmm.
So here I would put the error on that field, the UOM measure.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the only difference now is instead of a form control error, which you'd find here,
Yeah.
your error is going to be on the grid. So you're going to set the grid cell error, set grid cell error,
Okay.
and the grid is you only have one grid, so you select the grid. What row is the currently selected row?
Ah, okay.
What column? Let's say the unit of measure. What's the error code you want? Let's say it's whatever it is.
Okay.
Okay, that will set the error for when you set the currently selected row. It's the row that just got processed.
Uh-huh.
So it's when I tab out into a next row,
Yeah.
it's gonna call validate grid row. Actually, I could just show you like right now. I just set the error without even testing anything,
Yeah.
right? So I calling the function on row exit and changed. Nothing has changed.
Yeah.
Okay, but when I change something and tab down, it's gonna set an error.
Ah, on that
But
cell
on the row that was just processed,
and the cell.
the cell that was just processed, because I said all I wanted on this. The cell, you're telling it two things. What's the row? What's the column?
Okay.
The
Okay.
column, the column is you use the name,
Okay.
right?
Okay. 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 Okay.
Right? The column, you use the name. Column, you use the name of the column.
Mm-hmm.
The row, you can you can put a value in there. You can say the first row, the
Mm-hmm.
second row, the third row, the fourth row.
Oh, the column.
Yeah. This is what you're doing, grid and column.
And this is the
The
row.
row and the column.
Okay.
So the row, I can put a numbered value in there.
And which one did you
First
choose?
row, second row, third row. But
Oh,
there's a special one called currently
oh
selected
yes.
row.
Yes. Yes. Okay.
Okay, and that's the one you're generally like 90% of the time you're going to be using that one
Okay. Okay. Okay.
because you don't want to. You could write the code yourself to test what row was just processed and then use that, get that into a number and then pass, or you can just use currently selected row and the runtime takes care of it for you. Okay, so that is how you set the grid cell errors. I'm gonna disable it for now. But now I would test that,
Yeah.
and I would test um, in this case make sure it's greater than zero. Is zero valid? I would say for this application, let's make it valid.
Mm-hmm.
So even if they don't put anything, it's
Mm-hmm.
still valid. They might have a weight without a dimension.
Mm-hmm.
They'll be able to input the weight without the length, height, right? I know they complained. I made everything required at first, and they complained, hey, well, sometimes I have the weight, but I don't have the dimensions. Or sometimes I have the dimensions, but I don't have the weight.
Well, yeah, but they have to input something.
Well, yes and no. They have to input, yes, something. So if they input blanks all over the place, then you can put an error. You can say if everything's zero,
Oh,
put an error.
okay. But for now, everything requires more greater than zero. Every single one, every single cell. No.
Do it, but we're going to change it.
Okay.
Okay, so test weights and dims are input. So test the UOM, test the weights and input, using a measure our input. So that's the validation that you're going to do on the
Yeah.
grid level. Now, the only other thing we need to do now is make this not the short item number.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to add the second item number, same as I did here.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do the exact same technique. So I'm going to do this.
Fetch it.
Fetch it. If it's in update mode, disable it.
Okay. It's like a standard. We need a function doing that.
So here in the post dialog, I copied, and I'm actually going to do this. Actually, I'm going to do Yeah, if it's in update mode only,
Yeah.
I'm gonna do this. Okay, so this one I don't even need to do anymore because I'm gonna hide that one completely. So I'm just gonna delete that, but I'm not gonna hide it right now, just so you see what's happening visually. So when I do that, it takes care of showing the item number upon a fetch. But but when I do an add, when I type in something over here, I need when I tab out of there for that to go there. The short item number to go there, because that's what's
And
gonna
validated.
that and validate it.
Yeah.
Because that's what's gonna actually ultimately get saved. Not this. This is not getting saved anywhere. It's DI, right? So when to do that, I do the same thing I'm doing over here. Here, when the control is exited, I'm doing this,
Yeah.
right? So we're gonna do the exact same thing. When this control is exited and changed, I like to just go and click on the columns because sometimes when you copy from another form to this form, um,
It disables the
it's
first one.
sometimes it doesn't. It's not 100%. It's not 100%. It disables lines.
Yeah.
It it
But
it
it doesn't
it
touch
doesn't
the
map
first one.
properly. No, no, it doesn't touch the first one. No. Okay, so now
If I cut once the first one and I place it on the second one with local variables on the first one,
yeah, that won't. Yeah, that'll
everything will.
disappear. Yeah, that's another reason why I like programming a lot of in buttons.
Okay.
Because let's say you put your entire event
Yeah.
and you want to change the event that it's in.
Yeah.
Well, if you have local variables in that event,
Yeah.
you're gonna lose it all.
You lose everything.
But if you put it in a button
Uh-huh.
and just call the button, you just change where you call the button from. The local variables are tied to the button.
Gotcha.
That's why a lot of times I do like validation and like that. And
Because I was thinking of a way around it, and anyway.
okay, so now when I double click on there, it's disabled. When I do an add and I do, let's say SM50-LC, it's gonna go and grab it. If it's an error, it's gonna be an error. I can't save anything.
Yeah.
So I don't have to prevent anything. The application will take care of preventing all that stuff for me. So the only last thing I got to do now is hide this. It needs to stay there because that's what's getting persisted. So now I'm working with the second item number instead of the short item number. And the application looks more user friendly.
Yeah.
Except I don't know why you get these more
You
options.
have to move it.
Move it
Yeah. When you edit.
like this. Move this
Yeah.
like that. Like it happens to me, but it happens to you like tons. I don't understand. I don't know. We'll have to. I'm gonna investigate it. Um, okay, so now it's working. It's a working application, and now it works an add. I can add items, and you'll see that if I add 271, okay, if I add 271 and I add an each, when I try and save this, it's gonna tell me duplicate key not allowed
Yeah.
because it knows I'm trying to insert something that already exists.
You should update.
That's it. I should update it. I'm just letting you know that the application takes care of it all for you.
Okay.
So I don't have to worry about testing for any of that stuff. It's already there for me.
Yeah. How
So
did you insert?
instead of doing a select here,
Oh yeah.
I just did an add. I put
Oh.
in that item number
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
and I put it in each over there.
Yeah.
But it'll say, oh, it already exists, duplicate key. So then the user would find and say, oh, I need to update it. Oh, it's already there. Is it right? Yeah, it's right. I don't have to do anything. No, it's wrong. Update it. Okay. Um, the last thing that I want to say on this, okay, is more of a technique for the delete. Okay.
Mhm.
The delete is um, if you're working with one view, one table, add the delete button and JDE will take care of deleting for you. If you add a delete button on one view, multiple tables, very dangerous because JDE will not just delete the record in one table, it'll delete both records in both tables.
Okay.
Okay? So it'll delete, for example, in this application here, the work with. I can add a delete button here too,
Gotcha.
so that the user doesn't have to go into it to delete it,
Okay.
right? But if I add a delete button here, this is a join on F4101.
Yeah.
It'll delete the item from F4101.
Okay.
Okay? So I had no idea it worked this way. Thank God I caught it before testing. A while ago. This was like when I first started, right? I put a delete button there. I figured it was going to delete my record. I delete my whole item. There was a junior programmer who came in, and he actually wasn't even junior. He was more of a senior, but he went into sales for a while, and then he came back and he forgot a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, he put something into production. Okay, people were deleting things, and it was just deleting data. Thank God they caught it like early, because it would have been a big mess.
Okay.
So, point is that normally on a headerless detail,
Yeah.
you're working with one one table, one business view.
Yeah.
You can pretty much safely add the delete button. When you're working with a find browse, big chances you're not working with only one table.
Yeah.
You probably have some joins going on there. So to take care of that, what you would do is you would insert the delete button, but you would use the system function to suppress the normal behavior of a delete. So JDE has this stuff here. Delete grid record verify before, delete grid record verify after, delete grid record from database before, delete grid record from database after. Okay? So right before, okay? Um, hang on, let me show you one that I did here.
Yeah. I'm using the object browser all the time.
Okay, so normally what you do is on delete grid record verify before,
Mhm.
you do some validation. Can this thing be deleted? So here, like for example, there's a method that makes sure that all the quantities are zero. If none of the quantities are zero, you're not gonna get it's not gonna allow you to delete. And I'll show you why, okay? When you delete from a find browse form, the behavior is different than when you delete from a headerless detail. Shit, I don't know if that's gonna work. That's there. Okay. So when I click this and I click delete, this is what happens. Are you sure you want to delete?
Yeah.
So verify before is before this message even pops up.
Okay.
Okay. So let's say if it was greater than 10, okay, you're not even going to allow them to delete that record. So don't even pop up, are you sure?
Yeah.
Right? What you would do, you'd put your method, your method, your event rules on the delete record verify before.
Okay.
So here you would say, for example, if the grid column, and this is what's nice about JDE, on this event, on any event that I'm working with, it copies the relevant values into the GC for me. So when I'm working with this, I'm working with the record that's being deleted. So that all the GCs are the values of the currently being deleted record. So I'm going to say, let's say if the height is greater than 10, okay, it doesn't make sense, but if it's greater than 10, you're going to use a system function called suppress delete. And you're going to set a grid cell error to tell the user
Mm-hmm.
what, okay, let's say I did this, suppress delete, if it's greater than 10, okay, without warning the user. When I click height is greater than 10, this one here. When I click delete, the fuck? Maybe I'm wrong. You would set, yeah, I always do both at the same time, so maybe I'm wrong. Grid cell error, currently selected row, column, height, error code. I'm just going to put something standard.
Pops up.
Normally it pops before. I don't know why. Anyway, what you do here, I have to verify some code that I wrote before, but it should be popping before. Normally what you're doing here is before your verification method, are you sure you want to, right?
Yeah.
You enter some errors. But what we're going to do, okay, because the point of this whole thing was not for validation. My point is if you have validation code, it goes here, verify before.
Yeah.
If you have default behavior, so I don't want JDE to delete both from 4101 and from the other table. I would say when you're finished, when you're about to uh, delete the grid record from the database, suppress the delete, which means JDE's native behavior is going to be suppressed.
Mm-hmm.
So now if I just do that,
Yeah.
okay, and I run this, when I delete this, nothing's going to happen. Didn't delete it.
Yeah.
Okay, even if I refind, it's still there. Now if I remove that suppress delete, it's going to delete 4101 and this record from the 40 the 55 41002. So what I did there was I just suppressed the normal behavior of a deletion, and I'm going to do the delete myself. So then I would just use an input output, do a delete.
Yeah.
I would say in F5541002 is where I want to delete my data. I'm going to take the data from the grid column and I'm going to do a delete based on that key. Okay. And now that's not enough. So what I'll show you from this is why it's not enough. When I do this and I click delete and I click OK, you see, it's still there. But when I do a find, it's gone. So what I did on my delete event was I deleted it, but I didn't update the visual. I didn't re-render the. So you're doing two things. First, you're just suppressing the deletion. So you're doing three things. Suppress the delete of um, the normal JDE behavior. You take control over the deletion yourself, and then you delete the grid record itself. So there's a function to delete grid row. Delete grid row. So you would say which row, the currently selected row. That way you get a visual right away. You don't have to refresh, right? You don't have to refresh anything. And that's it. So now when I run this thing, it'll work properly. It will not delete from 4101, which we don't want it to do. So we would delete this, click OK, it's gone. If I do a find, it's gone. If I go check that item in F4101, it should be there, right? Otherwise, I know my suppress delete didn't work. I didn't put it at the right spot or something. Okay, so normally what you're doing when you're deleting, you're working with delete grid record verify before is where you're putting, like, the verify is where you're putting validation. This is where you're overriding kind of behavior, or you're doing something like, yeah, overriding behavior. So sometimes, for example, when I delete something here, I also want to delete it from there, from there, from there, from there. So I would do it delete grid record from DB after. So after you finish deleting this record from the database, go into those tables and clean up those tables, for example. Something you would do. So
you have to tell it explicitly.
You have to tell it explicitly. So the normal behavior is whatever's in the view is going to get deleted. JD is going to delete it. If anything, if you want to change that behavior, this is the events that you use to change that behavior. But all you got to do is add a delete button, and for like 80% of the time, you don't have to write any code. JDE will take care of it. Sometimes you'll have to overwrite that. That's it.